I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Sorry to bother you is over. Don't listen to what I say. Listen to what I want. The line I really wanted to use had some profanity in it, but oh my God.
There are a few of those.
Yeah, there's some choice profane lines in this movie. We're talking about Sorry to Bother You. It's the next and, dare I say, last in our Platformed Lives series. And I think I can say with great confidence that the first time I saw this movie was the first time you saw this movie.
Great confidence is correct, yes. And we saw it with Steve Sarmento, and the three of us enjoyed it. And it's bonkers world that Boots Riley created. And now here we are, returning to talk about it.
It was also the first time I experienced a Harkins theater.
And Pete's frozen over.
And that has been a great loss in my life. God,
all right.
God damn it. It's fine. And
there you are.
That was also the first and last time I experienced a Harkins theater. No, first time I experienced a Harkins theater. And
not the last.
No, there's been one other. Anyway.
The same day? It was the same day when we saw 8th
No,
grade?
and then we went back and we went to the Icebox, right? That's Harkins.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah. But it was the same day. We had a day of it. Okay. Platformed Lives. We did the Truman Show that you just heard. We did Nightcrawler. Which was fantastic. So we talked about impossible consent with Truman, and Nightcrawler was bypassed consent and coerced consent. And now we're here with manufactured consent. And oh dear, this was a crazy, crazy movie. It was a really interesting rewatch because I remember loving it for the emotional theatrical experience. Like the hard left turn that it makes is so crazy. I walked out of the theater and I had very, very high opinions of the movie. My opinions are less high on rewatch.
Yeah, that's where I sit.
Is that are we just in a real grumpy place right now, or is it real? I think it's real.
I think it's real. I'm curious. Well, I'm definitely curious as to like what it was that drew you to pick this one for this list. But I suppose in the scope of revisiting the story, I think that it definitely feels like there are some strong ideas, especially as it relates to, the series and Platformed Lives and everything. But I also feel that Boots Riley, as the writer-director, who, I'll just say is an incredibly unique and visionary director doing really interesting things with his stories, but also I found it fairly scattered, and I didn't feel like all of the elements actually landed. And that's, I think, on the rewatch, I was down from my high of the crazy exuberance of watching such a bonkers movie, and just looking at it, I found it a lot to struggle with.
Yeah, I think so too. The story is about a broke telemarketer who discovers his white voice and climbs the ladder at this outsourced telemarketing organization by selling out the entire world around him and his girlfriend and his colleagues at work. And meanwhile, the rest of the organization is trying to eat him, and he discovers that only maybe too late. And the key mechanics, or a couple of key mechanics in the very beginning that I think I adore. The first is the actual telemarketing is fantastic, right? The fact that he's trying to make these phone calls to people, and the way they demonstrate phone calls as the line rings, his desk drops into the location, whether people are having dinner or having sex. When you hear the phone ring, his desk is suddenly falling into their lives. I loved that irrationally. I think that is one of the best interpretations of that experience from both sides that I've ever seen put to screen. I think it's wonderful. I also think the manufactured part of his job, this sort of corporate platform that he's on, when Danny Glover's character advises him to use his white voice to sell more, he invents a white voice that it doesn't even really sound like white people. But, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly what Glover says. He says something about how this is what white people aspire to sound like, or something like it is a voice that is more attuned to what white people expect, and it's absurd, and it ends up working. That mechanic of overdubbing Patton Oswalt and David Cross and Lily James over our principal characters when they're speaking to and around white people is exceptional. And those two mechanics could be the major flow of the movie, right? That corporate platform that is saying so much about class and culture that I mean it's already swinging way, way broadly for the fences on this movie before it turns into the second half. So far I'm absolutely on board. How does that hit you?
I agree with both of those points. I think that the production design, the story construction, all of that paired together, camera work, editing, all of that in the process of moving the telemarketer's desk, like dropping it in, as you said, into the spaces. My favorite is when once he's become a power caller and he makes the call and then he's talking to the Japanese guy who's sitting on his bidet and Cash like actually reaches over and adjusts the settings on the bidet to hopefully help the guy out so that he seals the deal. It like just silly things like that, but it puts them into the same space where they actually are forced to interact. And I think that's what makes it so interesting is that journey that he has, but the way that Boots decides to depict it, I think perfectly taps into that feeling of like when a telemarketer calls you and they just like are crashing into your life and that's the last thing you want to deal with at that point, So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And this plus my sense memory of it led me to talk my wife into watching it with me. And so far, we're both on board with this movie experience.
Yeah.
Shortly after that.
Well, but let me finish because you didn't let me talk about the white voice and everything.
Oh, no, I thought you were done.
I think the white voice element also is a really clever element to add to the story where you have these people learning to like speak differently. And Langston says it's not really a white voice. It's what they wished they sounded like, what they think they're supposed to sound like.
Yes. And
that's kind of like the idea that we hear that. And it's the way that he describes it, I think is perfect. Because it's like you're about to finish the call. As soon as you're done, you're going to go hop into your Corvette and take off and go to the beach. Like creating this casual sense of a voice. And I think that's such a fascinating element. And it's tapping into, Richard Pryor. There have been other comedians like Eddie Murphy. They have done their own versions of the white voice, in comedy history. It's not like the first time that it's been done, but I think it's just such a sharp way to actually modify it for the purpose of sales calls, right? And I love that so much about what they're doing here. And I think an interesting element where it plays kind of we end up seeing it turn itself on its head is when Cash goes to Steve Lift's party and he's like, just do something, rap, because right. And he gets him, he's like, I don't know how to rap. And then he's just saying like the only black thing that he knows what to say, which is just terrible. But all of the white people at the party like totally get into it. And I think that's kind of the interesting flip side of suddenly now he's having to find a black voice to use in that particular moment to connect with that crowd. And I love the way that that Boots gives us both versions of that over the course of the story.
The one that constantly sort of surprises me is the Lily James overdub for Detroit, because I know what Detroit's accent is in real life, and it actually sounds kind of like Lily James. And so I didn't actually realize that she was getting an overdub when she was speaking to white people in the
rich art collectors,
in the rich art collection, museum or the gallery, and I thought that was very affecting, but so subtle, and that's the sort of commentary I think that the movie does when it's working at its best, which is a commentary on code switching in culture. And I think it works really, really well. And I think how corporations count on employees to code switch for their own personal gain that also directly serves corporate and capitalist gain. And I think that's one of the things that the movie does just brilliantly. And then it becomes something new. It takes all of these ideas and it puts them in this great big blender, and now we introduce Armie Hammer, playing maybe himself. I don't know.
Armie,
how does Steve Lift, the character of Steve Lift, hit you as you now meet the sort of corporate overlord of all of this?
Yeah, Steve's an interesting character because, the way that, just to kind of set up the world, we've got the telemarketing company, Regal View, where Cash works and selling crap. Like nobody wants to buy it. It's like encyclopedias and junk that, telemarketers and door-to-door salesmen were selling 30 years ago, 50 years ago. When he moves up the ranks to become a power caller, suddenly he is now selling things like I can't remember all of them, but like weapons systems, and like things like that,
and
for
labor,
WorryFree, and labor for WorryFree, and he becomes a great seller there, and ends up tapping into. So there is this connective tissue between this big WorryFree company, which hires people essentially as slaves, like people willingly sign up to work for WorryFree because look, I got this great place to eat and all this food and everything I need, but they're basically indentured servitude is what's happening right here. And that's kind of the big corporation that we have here. And I think it paints an interesting picture for kind of the corporate overlord of somebody who, I don't know, has crazy ideas as far as, I think that we're certainly living in a world where some of these corporate leaders have crazy ideas as to how to make their workforce work better and everything, right? Avoiding unions, everything they can to create this system that gives them all the money they need without having to worry about any of the people that are working for them. And so to that end, I think it plays well. I think at this point, I think the story starts going a little too big and broad in how it's painting things, because I don't know. I think there are times where I'm just like, okay, it's a little bit of a overdone, or it's painting it in a way that I've seen before, and it's not as interesting as Satire because it's like I've seen this.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know, like it's got a little bit of Brazil, a little bit of 12 Monkeys, a little bit of the movie foundational movies we sort of grew up on, but it's also doing them all at the same time. I think Steven Yeun's character is an interesting one because he comes in. He's one of the more nuanced characters in the movie because he comes in as an employee and he subtly starts becoming a rabble-rouser. And I think there's one line in the movie that describes that he's a serial rabble-rouser, right? He's a serial unionizer. He goes into places specifically to create a pro-labor kind of movement. And I was really interested in his story. I wanted to see more about him, but he is definitely kind of a C character. That by the time you get into the second half of the movie, we've got a lot of things playing. One, we've got this rift between Detroit and Cash because she is advocating for him to, get out of the power collar role. You are, taking advantage of people, and you're, using your friends or abusing your friends by crossing the picket line. You have the picket line, which is now a significant issue between labor and the telemarketing company. And you have WorryFree, the CEO, who now has an opportunity to present Cash with an opportunity that he just can't pass up, right? He just has to take this opportunity. It's going to be such a great opportunity. I actually think the pitch sequence, he brings Cash into this dark office and says, you have to watch this video. I think the video is crazy and funny. The act of getting him to watch the video, there's a lot going on between him and needing to go to the bathroom and the discovery, ultimately, of the Equisapiens. And I don't think it's the Equisapiens that I have a problem with. I low-key love the shock. I love, this is the biggest swing in the movie, that he's trying to go to the bathroom, and what he discovers are half horse, half human creatures in this set of stalls. And they want help. Please help us. It hurts. And we see all of these Equisapiens, like they're just naked on the floor. And that's what Lift wants to turn Cash into, to be his sort of Steven Yeun on behalf of the company character.
Or as he says,
right.
Is Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, right, is Martin Luther King Jr. on the inside. Yeah. For just a little while, and then he'll give him the serum, whatever, to the antidote, so he'll be a human again. And I think that is a big fantasy swing. And I think it's the chaos leading up to it in the movie, trying to do so much that by the time we get there, it is it's a straw on a camel's back. But I'm not 100% sure. I think I still am I find myself reveling in the exuberance of a filmmaker willing to do this kind of stuff, that I give it maybe a pass on narrative structure.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit where I sit with it, because I think it's such an interesting and just out there idea of suddenly, like, okay, that's what the CEO is actually doing. He has come up with a way to convert his workforce into half horse, half human hybrids, because as horses, they will work that much harder and get the job done, and less complaining, all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's an interesting idea. And, perhaps you could say, in the scope of these corporate CEOs who are out of touch with the realities of workforces, like, that's what they're looking for. What can I do to just like minimize the actual humanity in these humans that I'm working with, or that I have to hire, just so I can get them to work, 16 hours a day? Like, why can't I just do that? Like that, like there's a mentality there. But I do think that it's tricky. I think when you're going this broad and big, and you're coming up with an idea as crazy as these Equisapiens, like, everything else really needs to line up just spot perfect in order for it to still play okay, as opposed to just being like, what the hell am I watching now? And I think that's the line that I found, especially on the second watch, that Boots struggled with is like, I think there are so many ideas that Boots is throwing into the story that when it comes to the idea of the Equisapiens, it's just like, I feel like maybe we've just crossed too many lines suddenly, because I'm like, there were some strong points that you were building to, and now it's just kind of gotten really silly.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if it's if he takes some of the big swings leading up to the reveal of the Equisapiens, because I think the idea of the Equisapiens is it's seeded interestingly throughout the movie. Like, we get our first view of a horse and a person is Steve Lift's book. The cover of his book is him. I think he's riding a horse or standing next to a horse, but he's definitely, the design of that cover is such that it looks like horse and man are one. I think it's leading us along the path really subtly. I wonder if the sort of 20 minutes leading up to that reveal were less noisy, sort of conceptually noisy, if the Equisapien reveal would have been more powerful, like more impactful. I think the ramp up to him is might be too steep. So we're already sensorially exhausted by the time we get to this, oh my God, major shock. That's kind of where I sit on it. Ultimately, I think your point is fair. Like, after we introduce the Equisapiens, all the other pieces fall into place in a rather predictable way. Again, don't mind playing the hits. The hits are hits for a reason. It ends in a riot. There's a riot, and Cash doesn't actually get to experience the riot directly. He's in a armored vehicle, but he gets to see that ultimately the Equisapiens come to the rescue. He's orchestrated it very, very well, and now the Equisapiens, are his buddies. He ultimately turns everything in. He gives the fancy car to his buddy and goes back to living in his garage with Terry Crews. But now the garage is super decorated. Like, all of this, that kind of stuff, it was like, okay, I pretty much, that's how I probably would have ended it too. But it wraps up really tidily after, right after so much we've been through.
Until the denouement, which is a whole other element that suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, what? Okay. I guess we were just throwing that in there just to, that last little bit, just to give us a chance to scratch our heads a little more, as far as, like, suddenly he does turn into a horse, an Equisapien, and leads a revolt against Steve. I think, I don't know, I struggle with the ending also, because I'm like, why is this the ending that makes sense for this story? Is it because, like, did Cash learn a lesson? Is his lesson that he learned that it's not all about the money? I mean, that's kind of the theme of the movie is capitalism. Like, he wants to be making money. He wants to get out of this kind of crappy life that he has, find a way to have the good stuff. I mean, his name is Cash Green. I mean, literally is like his name. He couldn't get more obvious than that. But at the end, it's like, okay, so if he learned something, why does he have to go back and live in his uncle's garage again? Like there are elements of it that I'm still just like, okay, I see we're kind of going back to where he was, but I don't know story-wise if it makes sense to me. And I think that's like the strongest actually part of the ending is the fact that he does this big reveal that Steve Lift is turning people into Equisapiens. And what does it do? It spikes the stocks for the company. All these senators are thrilled and everybody's getting involved in it, and it turns it into this massive success. That to me is the most honest of the satire with all of this, is like, yeah, that's how a lot of this crap ends up going. Everything going on with Cash, though, I really struggled with the entire resolution of the story and when it comes to him.
Yeah, it becomes a reminder that we live in the worst timeline, which is like, of course, because it's like too believable. Of course, Steve Lift is going to be ringing the bell to open the market. Of course, people are going to be celebrating that we're doing this human horse hybrid thing. And in many ways, this is one of my favorite expressions of prison, right? Like the best prison. And Worry-Free looks like a prison. All of the advertisements are showing people who are so happy living in their bunks, eating their institutional meals, walking along, straight lines and living in ultimately cages. But this is a prison, and the best prison is the prison that people don't want to leave. They don't want to leave because they were desperate on the outside, and this answers so many questions that gives them emotional relief. That is another one of these elements in this movie that is that I think is really great. It's great because it lets us look at what are the things that are causing us great stress living in this society? What are the things that are causing us great grief? What are our financial, economic, labor woes in our everyday lives? And Worry-Free is an example of what if we went this far as a salve? What if we went this far to make you feel better? Is that too far? And for some people, the answer is no. It is not too far. And suddenly we're in Black Mirror. Yeah. I mean, that I think is one of the most interesting things this movie does from the sort of capitalist angle. I'm not sure where it becomes too much, because individually, all of these elements I think are important. They're important for the argument I think that Boots is trying to make.
Well, but then I think the problem is figuring out how to effectively work it all together into something that congeals as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem when we're looking at stuff individually. I'm going to go back to, this is a weird reference, but a Dandy and Aspic, talking about Aspic, right? We've got
I was thinking
all
the
of
same
these
thing.
pieces.
This is why we podcast together.
This is why we podcast. We've got all of these things floating in this gelatin, but they're not together, right?
Yeah.
They're all individually floating, but they're all in one big package. It's just not blended in any way. And I think that's my struggle with the film. I also ask myself, what is he saying about performance art when it comes to Detroit and her show?
Oh my
That's
goodness.
a whole other thing that I'm not really sure I understand. And so there's a lot of things that Boots is throwing in there. And, I'm all for people just throwing everything in there, especially on a first film. You want to just really kind of prove to the world that you can get stuff out there. And I think that's certainly feels like the case with what Boots is doing here. I just, I feel like it's still just nothing completely clicks for me.
I want to talk about the performance art. Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back. First, you can find the show on YouTube, and you can join us live when we record. We will even take your questions in the post-show chit-chat, and members get the full post-show conversation and always know what to listen to next. Subscribe to The Next Reel on YouTube. The link to this episode is in the show notes. We'll be right back.
All right, the performance art piece. Detroit is making this case. I guess it's a capitalist exploitation case. She stands up on a stage in the gallery. She takes off her trench coat and puts on a helmet. And she's wearing a bikini. Would you call it a bikini? That's like hands. There's hands coming, a hand coming up between her legs, covering her pelvis, and there are hands covering her breasts, and the rest she's naked. And then she has cell phones in one bucket and water balloons full of sheep's blood.
Yep.
And was there a third?
Casings in a third.
Right. And as she is reciting these lines from a movie, she asks the audience to hurl these things at her.
Right.
Now, I've never been to one of these performance art. Have you ever done anything like this? Have you ever been a party to it?
I've not.
I don't know that I would
Maybe that's
start.
what we're missing.
Yeah, I don't know that I would be complicit in the performance. I don't know that I would pick up a phone and huck it at her. But people did.
Yes.
People got on board with hurling sheep's blood, and she just went right on through it. And when Cash interrupts and says, "What are you people doing?" she gets mad at him.
Yeah.
They push him out like a virus and continue the sort of exploitative performance of the sheep's blood and the phones and the casings.
Yeah. Unless Boots is just making a comment specifically on kind of the absurdity of performance art, like, I don't know if I understand it. I'm not sure. I mean, okay, bullets and phones, sure, you've got, the violence in the media, perhaps. I mean, she's reciting a quote over and over from, I think it was a Kung Fu movie, if I remember correct, although I could be completely wrong. And then the phones, just like our connection to the media and just like our need to constantly be on them. But I don't get it. I still don't, like, I feel like I have to walk through too many hoops to try to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Especially because it, like, the rest of the art that she had, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was all Africa. Everything was taking different things and making a shape of the continent of Africa and hanging it on the wall. And that was all over the place. So we had all of that, but then there's this, which, like, I just don't know if it even connects to the Africa art.
Well, I took it as, in order for our cell phones to exist, we have to mine rare earth minerals, which are, largely in Africa. We have to take advantage of Africa. The bullets taking advantage of Africa from, generations of slaughter and, blood diamonds and now minerals. And the blood spilled is sort of in the sheep. So I feel like I can kind of get there, but I don't know if I'm getting there or if the movie got me there.
I do. She does say something. Now that you bring that up, I do remember, or maybe it's some audio that's playing at some point before she starts recording specifically about like the rare earth minerals that you have to mine. But
so maybe the movie did get me there, and it was,
sloppy. Maybe it was just sloppy.
Maybe it was sloppy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a statement around Detroit, and I think that's the thing that I want to pull apart. Like, what sort of utility is Detroit in the structure of the film? How useful is Detroit in the overall story moving us forward? Because it's a juicy part. She has a lot to do, but is she doing the right stuff?
Yeah, and I think that's an important question when it comes to the story, because I think Tessa Thompson, she's a great actress. We've talked about her a number of times on this show. And we've talked about all the Creed films for sure. She's somebody who I think can deliver strong performances. And the question with this is, in the scope of the satire that we're getting as it relates to Cash and this capitalistic system that he's become part of and everything, what is that that dance that we have going on between her and her growing frustration with him simply because he's doing his job and making money, but is doing it by, as he gets better at it, he has to start crossing the picket line as Steve Yeun's character raises everybody's ire and they all kind of start protesting. She sides with them. And so then and then eventually ends up sleeping with Steve Yeun's character, goes back to Cash. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I'm just not sure how all of it ties in unless there is an element that also relates to kind of just like the nature of, again, she's a performance artist. You kind of have to be performative in these jobs again, putting on a white voice and everything. We've already talked about, she has to put on her Lily James voice when she's talking to these rich art collectors. And so is there something to be said about how even in the art world, you still can't escape having to put on these airs?
Yeah, put on the performance. Everybody's performing. I actually don't want to falsely claim white performance, because this movie is predominantly, I think, about the Black experience and code switching. But there is also nothing authentic about Steve Lift, his character, right? He is absolutely performing something, right? And the white manager, right? The white manager in the
very opening.
The very opening.
When he hires Cash, yeah.
Absolutely. He's performing something that the two middle-level managers who are doing their their like team building speech, one of the best sequences in the movie, and it's very quiet, and it's just watching two white people be awkward. I loved it. I absolutely love this experience of them trying to make the team feel good. And the question comes from Cash, are you going to pay us more money? And she says, no, and just feels awkward about it. Like, that was fantastic. So, so much of this movie is about the switching that all of us do. And it's anchored clearly in our protagonist's sort of Black experience of code switching and what they're required to do just to live. And somewhere it becomes too much. So, thought experiment, right? Like, take away just the Equisapiens. What is this movie for you? Can you do that?
Well, I think then it becomes the conflict at the end is then still it boils down to, is he going to succumb to whatever the request is at that point that Steve Lift has of him, of just like helping him continue driving the train for the power callers, right? Maybe they're not horse people, but he's just pushing him to kind of continue that road. I mean, I think that there's a sense that story makes a little more sense because we're getting a cleaner version of kind of like just a person climbing in the corporate world only to realize that it's terrible and he doesn't want anything to do with it, right? That's kind of the story that we get there. Yeah, it might simplify it a little too much by taking the Equisapiens out. But I think this is the thing, you already had like created this world of WorryFree where you have people living as slaves, happy little slaves, living in these spaces. And I think that gets completely sidelined because of the Equisapiens. Yeah. And I think the story could have just continued in the WorryFree world and seen how that all resolved itself without having to go down the Equisapien path.
Do you remember, you came up here and went to XOXO with me, right? One year. We did the XOXO conference together here in Portland. And at lunch, we met someone who was talking about their new job, and they happened to get a job at, let's just say, a major platform company. Okay. And it was a major platform company that was in it was in the media for malfeasance, let's just say, at the time. And I remember after she walked away, you and I got our box lunches and we went over to eat. And we had this conversation about how hard it is to have a conversation with this person that doesn't end in, why did you choose to work there, right? This movie is the encapsulation of that argument, right? Like, why are you doing this with your blood and sweat and toil for a company that is objectively making things worse in the world? Yeah. Why are you doing this for capitalism? And so this movie is all about the giant gap that exists between individual achievement and corporate achievement. And that is an uncomfortable place. And WorryFree has filled that gap with institutionalized slavery. And I think that's a great movie. I think that's really cool and an awesome story and a thinker. And the longer you and I talk about it right now, the thing that is my favorite thing to talk about with the movie, which is the Equisapiens, I think may be the movie's biggest villain.
Oh, I agree. I think it pushes it to, I mean, I'll tell you, I will say it makes you not forget the movie.
Yeah.
You definitely remember the Equisapiens when you watch this movie. But yeah, the problem is that it feels like a bridge too far. And I think that's the element that is frustrating, because I feel like we lose everything about WorryFree. Like, I just don't even remember WorryFree by the time I get to the ending. I just am thinking about these horse people running around and all of this. And I think that's the struggle that we really have throughout is trying to remember the journey that Cash is on and what the point of all of this is as far as the story. Because like there are other things in here too. Like we've got the game show that pops up on TV all the time that Langston, Danny Glover's character, loves to watch. He's got the shirt, he says, beat the crap out of me. And like, what's the, like, that felt very kind of like 70s Monty Python to have like that sort of game show on the TV. And I just didn't know, other than just more commentary on, well, this is what people love watching, the most nonsensical stuff. But it's just like, I feel like we're just getting so many threads of the story in so many different aspects of this world that we keep losing focus on the WorryFree story.
What was the name? The problem that with the game show is that it just screams of idiocracy. What was the game show about that they were watching in that show? It was just people getting kicked in the crotch.
In Idiocracy?
In Idiocracy. It was the same model. Like people watch the dumbest stuff when they're the dumbest people. And that's, that was kind of a riff off of, that felt a little bit too literal to me.
Ow my balls.
Yeah, right. Good pull. Boy, you remember that well.
There was also I Love Money. I think was something else. But like this sort of programming we see all the time.
Yes.
It's been spoofed in so many different things.
Right.
And so that's why, like, when this show came up in the scope of the everything else going on with this movie, I was like, oh, okay, well, I've seen this before. It's not that unique. Same thing when Cash gets struck in the head. I think it's the second time he's crossing the picket line. There's the woman who throws a soda can at him and it clocks him in the head.
Yes.
And little does he know, that video of her throwing it, hitting him in the head, turns into this YouTube viral sensation. Everybody's watching. It's got hundreds of thousands of views or millions of views. Children are dressing up for, like, as the guy who got hit in the head for Halloween. You've got them all
in their afros with the can like glued to their head. There's a little old lady who has the homemaking show, who's showing you how to make your own version of the costume. Like it becomes a thing. And so, so that's another thing. Like, does that tie into this capitalistic story and everything going on with WorryFree, or is it too loose? I think it's positive texture to the rest of the movie, and again, the more I think about removing the Equisapien line, the more literal we get to take Cash's complicity in helping Steve Lift's company be successful and the choices he gets to make. The rest becomes a much more even texture of the kind of culture that he exists in, and the crazy bonkers moment becomes the performance art piece, right? Remember that time when Tessa Thompson stood on stage with the hand bikini and had people throw sheep's blood at her. That's the weird moment we talk about, not the naked horse people with the massive horse penises.
Right.
It almost seems cheaper to talk about it in this regard. Like oh, right, the horse costume was the thing to make us remember this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, did you see Boots' latest movie, I Love Boosters?
I haven't seen it yet, but my son saw it at a festival and said he actually really liked it.
I liked it too, but as I think about it more and more, I really feel it's going to fall into the same trappings that this film did, where as I revisit it, I'm like, yeah, a lot of interesting ideas here, but it doesn't congeal as well as it needed to. Like, the ideas are fascinating, but it's really scattered.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I fall with this one. I think the more I sit on having seen I Love Boosters, I feel like that's kind of where I'm landing with that one. I think Boots is a creative director, and I love that he's pushing boundaries and just doing insane things. But I do think that I want to see him fine tune that satire so that things feel stronger. Because what happens is, for me at least, when I watch these or revisit these, is I just don't think the satire is very strong anymore.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Is it because the satire becomes too obvious?
No, I just don't know if he clearly has a sense as to what he's actually trying to satirize. Like
if you were to boil it down for this movie, what is this a satire of?
I mean, I would say it's a satire on the capitalist system, but even there, again, I start losing the thread, because it's like, well, but then how does Tessa Thompson and the art world tie into that? Why do we keep cutting to his old football team and other than needing them?
Right. And their very principal role in the end of this movie, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So there are elements that I think are interesting, but I still end up struggling. And I think that's
none of that actually includes the cultural code switching part, which is also the other thing that we're satirizing here. And I think we just defined why this movie may be a collection of too many awesome ideas that come together in a way that's a little bit haphazard.
Yeah, yeah.
And with all of this, I still generally enjoy my time with it.
I enjoyed my time less this time.
Yeah, for sure. But we were falling out of our chairs at that one day in Harkins.
Well, I will say it's a fun type of movie to see with an energetic crowd.
For sure.
That helps.
Oh, yeah. If you want to really enjoy this movie, boy, this is a bad thing to say at the end of our conversation. But if you really want to enjoy this movie, introduce it to other people who haven't seen it in a group. You'll have a blast to watching them experience this movie.
It really has to be the right
it has to be the right people.
I think.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think this is one of these off the wall bonkers movies that some people just are instantly going to be turned off with.
I like to think if you know your movie people. Again, I watched it with my wife. That was a mistake.
Yeah. My wife she hated both this and I Love Boosters.
Does Boosters have the same kind of a third act pivot like this one does?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody aliens?
No.
Okay.
It's definitely bonkers.
Okay. I'll watch it.
Bonkers. Yeah.
All right. What do you want to do now? Shall we do another break?
I think that's it. So, yeah, let's move into the back half. But first, let's take a quick break.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Zabuton, Cruella, and Zizzo featuring Heather, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show and the full archive at truestory.fm. You can follow us from there. You can follow us from there too. Plus, you can find out how to become a member and go further with every episode. Check out our merch store at thenextreel.com/merch. And if your app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. All right, Andy, awards. You notice, I don't know what you're doing picking the hardest artists for me to say without a pre-read. Cruella featuring
Heather was a hard one, yeah.
Heather was hard. It just the featuring I didn't expect, and my rhythm was off. So anyway,
I know.
It's award season, Andy. How did it do at award season? Sorry to bother you.
It did okay for itself. 20 wins, 56 other nominations. Over at the Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Sci-Fi Film, but lost to Ready Player One. And Boots Riley was nominated for the Legion M Breakout Director, but lost to Ari Aster for Hereditary. Are you familiar with Legion M?
I'm not.
Legion M is the world's first fan, and maybe still only, I don't know, but fan-owned entertainment company. You can basically buy stock in films, help fund movies, TV shows, all of that, and then share in their financial upsides. It's been going on for, at least since 2018, and it's been something where a number of films have actually gotten the funding through these crowdsourcing ways. So it's been cool. Yeah. At the DGA Awards, Boots Riley was nominated for Best First Time Director, but lost to Bo Burnham for 8th Grade. Likewise, at the Gotham Awards, he was nominated for a Breakthrough Director, but lost to Bo Burnham. LaKeith Stanfield nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Ethan Hawke in First Reformed. And it was nominated for the Audience Award, but lost to Won't You Be My Neighbor. At the NAACP Image Awards, it was nominated for Outstanding Independent Motion Picture, but lost to If Beale Street Could Talk. And it was nominated for Outstanding Writing in a Motion Picture, but lost to Black Panther. At the Film Independent Spirit Awards, it was nominated for Best Screenplay, but something we've talked about on the show, it lost to Can You Ever Forgive Me? And it did win Best First Feature. At the Sundance Film Festival, it was nominated for the Dramatic Award, but lost to The Miseducation of Cameron Post. And last but not least, over at the Black Reel Awards, LaKeith Stanfield was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Chadwick Boseman in Black Panther. Riley was nominated for Best Director, but lost to Ryan Coogler for Black Panther. It did win Best Screenplay, Best Emerging Director, and Best First Screenplay. And then it also lost Best Ensemble and Costume Design, also to Black Panther.
It seems like with all of that acclaim, it probably did fairly well at the box office.
Yeah, Boots Riley had a budget of $3.2 million to create his crazy indie film, which is about $4 million in today's dollars. The movie premiered at Sundance January 2018, then had a limited release July 6th, 2018, opposite Ant-Man and the Wasp and Whitney. It expanded in its second week, which bumped it to 7th place, but it never made it higher than that. Still, it did find its people, going on to earn $17.5 million domestically and $792,000 internationally. All told, the movie ended up earning back close to 6 times its budget, landing with an adjusted profit per finished minute of nearly $170,000. That is a great place to land for Riley and allowed him to continue crafting his crazy visions of the world.
I love it. Good for Boots. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
These are movies that are, like I said, I relish the experience of having watched this film the first time. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I still will probably seek out and watch other Boots Riley's, other projects of Boots Riley. I think that Boots has a unique vision, a creative voice, is doing something new and different. Is it always landing? No. But I mean, I tell you, I still found more to engage with this, even if I didn't really care for it this time. I was like, there's still so much interesting things just that are happening in the course of the story that made it worth my time. That's how
absolutely. I can't disagree with any of that. I think it's absolutely worth watching. It's definitely worth watching once. And it is one of those movies that is heavily detail oriented, right? The production design is beautiful and precise, and it's worth looking at closely. And I mean, what was it? 61 locations in 28 days he shot this movie. I mean, it is an exhaustive story of production, and I think has lots of wonderful reasons to be celebrated. And frankly, LaKeith Stanfield, Tessa Thompson, this is great work on their parts. Like, this is really, really wonderful work. Is it a 5-star film for me? No, it's not, but it's really, really good.
Well, and just going back to something we brought up earlier, Jason Kizvarde was the production designer and also would go on to do Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I think you can see that thread in such creative production design work with the desks and the way things were moving and everything. Like, I just think that's like another moment that I thought was really creative when we see, I guess you could just call it it's not really a montage, but the moment where everything in Cash's apartment starts upgrading and like the TV just splits open.
Yeah.
Like the old TV splits open and a brand new TV comes out of it. Like things like that. I'm like, this is fun and clever and physical. Like Boots Riley, very into physical effects. Like all of the Equisapiens, we haven't really talked about the fact that it's all physical, real people in these crazy costumes. Like it's very physical, very present. And I think that's something that probably Boots latches onto to enhance these crazy worlds of his.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, that is it, I guess, for our conversation about Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You. Next week, we're kicking off a new series called Smoke and Mirrors, a look at how media and political spin get built and sold, timed to give us something to chew on ahead of the midterms. Starting with Tim Robbins' Bob Roberts, his 1992 mockumentary about a folk-singing conservative Senate candidate and how easily campaign coverage can be turned into a weapon for the candidate wielding it. All right, let's do our ratings.
Letterboxd.com/thenextreel. That's where you can find our HQ page over on Letterboxd, where we track and review all the movies that we have talked about across the Next Reel family of film podcasts. What are you going to do? 5 stars and a heart. What are you going to do?
I initially gave this 3.5 stars and a heart. I can't give it that. I was torn. I'm like, is it 2.5? Is it 3? I think I'm going to go, I'm torn. Is it like 2.5 and a heart or 3 stars and no heart?
It's a real Sophie's choice.
It is. I think I'll do 3 stars, no heart.
I am going to level up a little bit with 3 stars and a heart. I had originally given this 4 stars and a heart, and I'm with you. I think this conversation has reminded me all the areas that I have more of a challenge with this movie, and so I'm gonna drop it down to 3 stars. But so it's right across the bow. I mean, it's very middle ground. Still a good film. Still totally worth seeing. A lot to appreciate. I don't know how many times I'm going to watch it from here on out.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, that averages out to 3 stars and a heart, and you can find that you can find the show on Letterboxd at The Next Reel. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film and Pete at Pete Wright. So what did you think about Sorry to Bother You? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.